um vídeo muito interessante do mestre Reiki Justin Stein, do Canadá, que a Cláudia vai passar a apresentar.
Em relação ao Justin, o Justin estuda tudo que tem a ver com Reiki desde o tempo do mestre Mikao Usui, tudo que tem a ver com a cultura japonesa, desde o tempo em que o Reiki se iniciou no Japão, desde os primeiros momentos do mestre Mikao no Monte Kurama, até a expansão desde a Ásia e depois mais tarde para a Europa, até aos nossos dias. Eu contactei o Justin e sei que ele neste momento está a ver e sei que vai ficar orgulhoso em ver a sua apresentação, que ele esteve sempre muito aberto, e agradeço de fundo do coração, porque ele é uma pessoa que tem muito trabalho, que ele trabalha numa faculdade e está sempre a trabalhar em pesquisa, tem muitos trabalhos para apresentar, e foi de coração que fez este vídeo para nós. Daí dirigir-lhe agora umas palavras em inglês. Justin, thank you very much for your help. We are very proud to have you on this Congress today, and I hope to see you soon, and I hope that your studies are a step further for our Reiki here in Portugal. Thank you. Rita, podes passar, por favor?
Hello. Thank you for the invitation to speak again to the annual Congress of the Portuguese Association for Reiki. My name is Justin Stein. I am an instructor of Asian Studies at Kwantlen Polytechnic University in British Columbia, Canada. And I'm going to speak today a little bit about my specialty, which is the historical development of Reiki, and statements that some of the early teachers of the lineage said about the connections between Reiki practice, Reiki treatment, and mental health, as well as speaking of some recent clinical trials, including among them some that engaged in blinding, where one group receives Reiki and one group does not receive Reiki, but nobody knows for sure which is which. Randomized trials, right, where a large pool of potential subjects are randomly assigned to the control group and the experimental group. And so I'd like to see the connection between some of the things that were said by the early teachers and masters of the tradition, seen here on the left, including Mikao Usui, who is the second row down and third from the left. One of his master level students, Tomobechi Gizo, who is in the inset all the way on the right, and Hawayo Takata. And what they said and how what they said seems to be supported by some of these kinds of initial clinical trials into Reiki's efficacy for mental health treatments. So as I said, first, take a look at the historical side, looking at their statements about Reiki's efficacy for treating mental health, and also their statements about the relationship between mental health and physical health. Then we'll take a look at some recent clinical trials that also suggest Reiki's efficacy for treating mental health and the relationship between mental health and physical health. And finally, I'll end with some conclusions. Okay, so first, we're going to take a look at a few quotes that seem to be in Usui Sensei's own words. This is a section of the Reiki Ryoho Hikei that you can see on the right, the Reiki Therapy Handbook, which is distributed to members of the Shinshin Kaizen Usui Reiki Ryoho Gakkai, the organization that Usui Sensei founded in 1922. And the book seems to date from that time, although we're not entirely sure. We've never found a first edition, for example, but later editions say that the first edition was published in 1922. And specifically, we're going to look at a section of the Hikei called the Kokai Denju Setsume, the public explanation of instruction. And in there, which is a question and answer with Usui Sensei, he's asked about what famous medical researchers think about Reiki. And in one of his answers, he says, Kondo Igaku Hakusei. So kind of Kondo, he's a PhD in medical science, said that the belief that medical science has made great progress is actually a great superstition, because modern medicine's great weakness is that it completely ignores the mental faculties. He goes seishin sayo, and seishin could be mental or spiritual depending on the context, but in this case, I think it's probably mental. And it's interesting, this is from almost 100 years ago, and you can wonder, how much advancement has modern medicine made on the mental faculties in the last 100 years. Certainly, it's made some very important advancements. Our understanding of how brain function works is much more sophisticated. Our understanding of neurotransmitters and other aspects of mental health. Our growing understanding just in the last, I think, decade or two of the importance of gut health and gut inflammation, our microbiome, right? The kinds of probiotic, bacteria that live in our gut, and the relationship between a healthy gut and a healthy mind is something that's just starting to be understood better now. So there's a lot of kind of progress that we've made, but it seems that there still is a lot of misunderstanding about the mind, a lot of mystery about how best to treat the mind, and particularly about the relationship between the mind and the body. What's often known as the placebo effect was written off for a long time as something that science had to ignore. But now there's starting to be more research into how to harness the power of the mind to cure the body. And this relationship between mind and body has long been recognized in so-called alternative medicine or complementary medicine, including in Reiki. So I guess that'll come up again in a minute. But first, I wanted to talk about one more quote to Hike. Usui Sensei is asked, what kinds of illness can be healed with Usui Reiki Ryoho? And he says, any kind of illness, whether mental or physical. And they say, is it only for illness? And he says, it does more than just heal physical illnesses. He talks about sickness of the kokoro. And kokoro is a key term here. Maybe some of you know it already. But in Japanese, kokoro means the heart and the mind. And so it refers to what we might call kind of mental and emotional phenomena. And so he says, sickness of the kokoro, such as worry, being frail or weak, cowardice, right, being scared, indecisiveness, nervousness, and other bad habits can be corrected. And once they're corrected, he says, we all can be filled with happiness or well-being. The word is kofuku. With our kokoro being like the kokoro of the kami and the Buddhas, right? Being kind of divine, free of worry, strong, brave, decisive, so having a kind of divine heart mind will fill us with happiness and well-being. And it's interesting, kofuku, well-being, can talk about, being physically well as well. So this kind of connection starting in this quote about this connection between mind and body and the efficacy of Reiki in treating both. And here, one more quote from the Kokai Denju Setsume is a great quote. He says, when the kokoro conforms to the way of truth and is healthy, then the body, the physical body, will also naturally become healthy. So again, very strongly saying that by treating the mind, one also treats the body. And when the mind is healthy, the body too naturally becomes healthy. And this is an idea that's also found in the teachings of Hawayo Takata. This is a quote from an interview she did in 1979 as part of trying to write her autobiography. And she was telling a story about why do some people get exposed to bacteria and viruses and germs and not contract illness, while other people do contract illness. And she says that if your vitality is high, you can brush off these diseases. Okay, what is vitality? It's hard to say exactly. I think it has something to do with what the Japanese call genki, right? This kind of foundational energy, right? This strong kind of inner force. And how do you become vitalized, Takata says? She talks about basically the self-treatment of the abdomen, right? Treating your inner organs. She calls this the big motor. And when your big motor, when your vital organs, your inner organs are working well, she says, this eliminates toxins. And also, she says, circulation is important. Okay, so maybe blood circulation, maybe ki circulation. She doesn't say. But finally, she says, and if you have a happy mind, you can say, I am a healthy person. And so Reiki is prevention, because Reiki vitalizes the organ, increases circulation, and gives us a happy mind. And this is what she calls vitality. Okay. One more example from the historical is one I mentioned before, Gizo, Tomobechi Gizo. He is one of Usui Sensei's Shihan, or master level students. And he writes in his memoirs that these everyday actions will keep your kokoro calm with little anxiety. And if you get sick, you will be patient. You won't worry. And he writes elsewhere in this memoir that worrying about being sick lowers your immune response, he says. He says that basically to be calm, to be confident, makes your immune system better, and it makes you heal better. And so he offers these daily practices that he says will help your kokoro, which will also help you to heal better. And he says they're difficult to follow, but these are the things he says. In the morning and the evening, recite the 5 precepts in your kokoro and try to realize them in your everyday practice. Okay? So not to worry, not to get angry, to be grateful, to do your work well, to be kind to people. Right? This, he says, helps heal your kokoro. Also, to do everything calmly in your thoughts and in your actions. Don't overdo yourself. To breathe quietly from your abdomen, from your belly, with relaxed shoulders. To relax and have good posture. To get enough sleep, and to be careful not to hurt your stomach. I think this is really interesting, the way that he sees sleep and kind of gut health, right, intestinal health, your digestion, as related to your kokoro. I think these are things that more modern research, in the last 70 years since he wrote these words, has really emphasized and confirmed that sleep and digestion and mental health are all related. So that's really interesting. I find that in addition to talking about Reiki and the 5 precepts, that he also has these kinds of very physical ideas about how to have a healthy kokoro. Okay, so now I'd like to transition to the second part of the presentation, talking about some clinical studies. And some of these, I'm sure maybe some of the other presenters at the Congress will also talk about, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about any of them. Some of them are randomized and some of them are not. Some of them have control groups and some of them do not. I'm not going to go, I don't have time to go into all the details, but I do give the bibliographic information. So if you're interested in these studies, you can find them maybe online, or I don't know if you have a way to post them to your website, but these are some major studies in the last 20 years about the relationship between Reiki and mental health. So first, I think this is among the first studies on this subject. Wardell and Ingebretson look at Reiki treatments, 30 minutes of hands-on treatment. The woman doing it is a 20 years plus experienced master, and they found that it produced significant decreases in state anxiety, which is a expression of how anxious is the person, feeling at this moment, and different from maybe their general disposition. Significant decrease in immunoglobulin A, which is a antibody that is part of the immune response. So Reiki seems to increase people's ability to have immune responses. And there's also a decrease, although not statistically significant decrease, in cortisol levels, the hormone that is related to stress. So that's some interesting findings in the first trial I'm going to talk about. The second one, Shore examined 3 groups: a hands-on healing group, a distance Reiki group, and a control group that did not receive anything. And among these 3 groups, she found that the group receiving hands-on Reiki and the group receiving distance Reiki both saw a significant reduction in symptoms of psychological distress compared with the group that did not receive anything. And 1 year later, she interviewed them again, and she found that the groups that had received Reiki in her study a year earlier continued to have significantly lower symptoms of psychological distress. So that's another very interesting study. Got a few more studies I want to talk about. This one by Baldwin, Wagers, and Schwartz is one of several studies that Ann Baldwin and Gary Schwartz did together. Ann Baldwin has a new book out on Reiki in clinical practice, where she talks about some of these studies. But this one, I think, is one of the clearest ones that they performed. So they were giving rats noise, and the noise would raise their blood pressure, would raise their heart rate, basically stress them out. And in the study, they gave rats 15 minutes of Reiki after a few days of this noise, and they found that they didn't have the same heart rate reaction to the noise after getting Reiki. Then, after a couple of days of getting Reiki, they gave them what they call sham Reiki. So they had people who are not trained in Reiki, did not receive Reiki initiations, put their hands on the rat and do basically the same thing, but not the Reiki, just to see as like a placebo. And the rats did not have the same effects. Their heart rates went up when they heard the noise again. And so it seems that the Reiki worked in a way that the sham Reiki did not work, even with non-human subjects. So that's another very interesting study, I think. Another study by Kelly in 2009. This is a dissertation he wrote for his research at North Central University. He today is a mental health professional. I think he's doing a PhD in psychology. He looked at people in a depression treatment program, and they were divided into a control group who were just getting the regular depression treatment, and an experimental group where, in addition to the depression treatment, they got distance Reiki once a week for 4 weeks. And he also found that the group receiving the distance Reiki found a significantly greater decrease in their depressive symptoms than the group that did not receive Reiki. And yeah, he kind of concludes that maybe in addition to conventional psychological treatment, getting distance Reiki would also improve, or hands-on or distance Reiki would also improve people's results. Finally, 2 more studies that in the last 10 years. The first one, Richardson et al. Looks at older adults in community living, so kind of an old age home. And they received 30-minute sessions of hands-on treatment, as well as mental emotional treatment from Reiki masters with 8 to 10 years experience. And they found that between the pre-test and the post-test, there were significant decreases in measures of depression, anxiety, and pain. They have some nice qualitative data in the study as well, where people said after the Reiki session, I felt like I was in a pink cloud. People said I felt, my anxiety leaving. And yeah, they just felt more relaxed and well. And yeah, so that was a great study, a very interesting study. And one last one kind of tried to reproduce or test some of the same things from Richardson et al. Study. This study was done in Turkey by Erdogan and Çınar. And they also looked at depression in people in an elderly home, a nursing home. And they had 3 groups, a group receiving weekly hands-on sessions, a group receiving sham Reiki, where people put their hands on who were not trained in Reiki, but did the same kind of hand positions, and then a group with no intervention. And the groups with the sham Reiki and no intervention did not show significant decrease, whereas the group that did receive Reiki showed significant decrease in depression. Okay, so what do we get from all this? From 1922 to 2020, it seems that there is evidence that Reiki is effective for treating a variety of mental health issues, including anxiety and depression. But why? We still don't really know. There's a lot of different theories out there. But one of the things that seems clear is that it has something to do with the relationship between mind and body, right? That when the mind is calm, that it decreases other things in the body, which may reinforce having a calm and clear mind. This may also have something to do with spiritual practice, being open to intervention from some kind of non-physical source may also have something to do with it. But remember, in some of the studies, these people were getting distance Reiki without even knowing they were receiving distance Reiki. So it can't really be chalked up to placebo effect. Also with the rats, right? That has an effect on rats. So there seems to be something going on a kind of psychosomatic level, right? Where there's mind and body linked. And this might be what Usui and Takada were talking about when they talked about a healthy kokoro or vitality, that there's some sort of well-being that produces immune responses, but also a kind of calm mind, right? That these things are very linked. And yeah, I think future research is needed. So I think I'm a little bit over time, but I appreciate your attention. Thank you so much. If you're interested in some of my writing, you can check out my website, justinstein.academia.edu. So thank you very much, and be well. Okay, take care. Thanks again for the invitation.
Fantástico.
Muito bom.
Nós vamos disponibilizar já de seguida, vamos dar só alguns segundos. Vocês vão poder depois apontar e tomar nota. No site do Justin Stein está lá todos estes estudos, toda a apresentação que ele fez neste momento. O Justin veio a pedido da Cláudia, porque a Cláudia é que fez um pedido especial ao Justin para participar. Não podia, mas fez isto, não foi?
Exatamente, assim como amanhã no fórum também vamos ter outra surpresa, também diretamente da Suíça. Por isso, vão à página da Associação Portuguesa de Reiki e é só ir onde está a publicidade do nosso fórum e clicarem lá para nós podermos adicionar.
Exatamente, como podem ver aí, podem tomar nota, vamos dar alguns segundos. Se quem quiser pode ver essa apresentação. Nós não fizemos a apresentação em simultâneo, porque não daria nesta plataforma o vídeo mais a apresentação.
Exato.
Então optámos por pedir para que passasse o vídeo. Portanto, http jansenstein.academia.edu. Poderão ver depois mais informação dos seus estudos. Eu quero agradecer...
Assim como a bibliografia, toda a bibliografia que ele falou está no site dele.
No site, aliás, eu fui até a pesquisar, o site tem lá todos os livros, estudos que ele tem feito, toda esta informação, vocês podem lá ir percorrer, não tem qualquer problema. Vão mesmo ao site, entrem, tem lá estudos muito, muito interessantes e podem até consultar. Obrigado, Rita. Entretanto,